Hi, everyone. Welcome to Six Figure Authors, the show that helps you take your writing career to the next level. I'm Andrea Pearson, and I'm here with my two co-hosts.
I'm Joe Lalo.
And I'm Lindsay Baroker.
And joining us today is best-selling author Sarah Painter. Sarah, is that how you say your last name?
It is.
Good, awesome. And she has a beautiful accent, as you'll find out here soon. And Sarah is the author of several best-selling fantasy novels, including her urban fantasy series, Crow Investigations. She is the host of the Worried Writer podcast and has written 2 nonfiction books for authors based on the show and her own experience as an anxious, introverted creature. I love that wording. Before writing books, Sarah worked as a freelance magazine journalist, blogger, and editor, combining this career with amateur child wrangling, also known as motherhood. Sarah lives in rural Scotland with her husband and children. She drinks way too much tea. Just kidding. Just too much is what she says. Too much tea. Loves the work of Joss Whedon, which I do too, and is the proud owner of a writing shed, which I'm very fascinated by. Anyway, so welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, we are going to be asking Sarah a lot about marketing as an introvert and how to successfully market urban fantasy when you're not in KU. And Sarah is one of the authors that is participating in this year's Business Books for Authors Story Bundle. That's the Story Bundle's business book thingy that Kevin J. Anderson puts together every year. Anyway, we're going to delve into that more in a bit. But first, Sarah, why don't you go ahead and tell us how you got into indie publishing?
Sure. So I think like everybody, I always wanted to be a writer, and but it took me a wee while to really overcome my terrible self-doubt enough to really give it a good go. And I initially just thought traditional was the way to go. So I spent, a few years getting rejected at all levels, very exciting, and getting an agent, changing agents, getting a new agent, doing a master's, basically looking for the external validation that being a real writer, making it. And in 2013, my debut came out. I got a deal with Karina. And instead of the sort of heavens opening and birds singing and all my self-doubt disappearing and the world becoming great, instead, I was even worse. I totally honestly, I lost my tiny mind because all of my self-doubt was still there. All of that external validation wasn't enough. I still didn't feel like a real writer. And to really just cap it all, I had no control. So I had my dream, finally, and anybody could just take it away from me because it wasn't in my control. And so I was basically writing another book for Karina and panicking and procrastinating and generally being in not a great state. And I started investigating indie publishing. I discovered Joanna Penn originally, and then others. And it was as if as soon as I realized that you could look at publishing and writing as a business, oh my goodness, that was it for me. And added to that, I started the Worried Writer podcast and chatting away to all authors on both sides of, I don't really want to say both sides of the fence, but trad and indie. And I discovered very clearly that all my lovely, lovely trad friends were still panicking and disempowered and not making very much money, generally speaking. And all my indie friends, were empowered and excited and sharing strategies. And they had this real sense that they were in control because they were. And that was it for me. I knew I had to go. Hybrid, indie, whatever.
That's kind of close to, I mean, not exactly obviously how it went for me, but I was with a traditional publisher and I was like, there's so much control and they can, this was back in 2010ish, 2011. But I was at that point, that was when all the ebooks were exploding and my publisher wasn't doing anything where ebooks were concerned. I mean, it's like, you can release my book as an ebook and then we can take care of paper later. And she was like, nope, we're doing paper. And I was like, it was just absolutely ridiculous. And I was like, this is stupid. And I wanted to be more involved. And she let me be involved, but then it was kind of like you can help out, but I've got the final say. And so she nixed everything I wanted and put a stupid book cover on it. And anyway, so I ended up switching over to indie publishing. It's, so much better that way.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm so delighted. I think I'm glad that I went trad first because I know that the grass isn't greener. If you see what I
Yeah.
mean. Again, no disrespect. I love the whole book industry, but for me, the grass is not greener. And also, I just had to because I wish that I had been more empowered to choose myself earlier on. I've wasted all that time. I've only been hybrid for a couple of years. But on the other hand, I am who I am and I am very anxious and I had to do it that way.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It really does. And that's a good point about the grass being greener. I think
Mm,
that I've had down years, I've had up really good years. The bad years, I might have been tempted to try traditional publishing, but having been there, I was like, no, I will never go back. Because even in my worst months, when I was being indie published, I was still making more than all of my traditionally published author friends. And so, it's just not worth it. I'm not gonna do better over there.
yeah.
You mentioned in your email to me that you've been a six-figure author for the past couple of years. What was it that tipped you over?
First off, going hybrid. I think, as we just touched on, it is so much easier to make money when you're getting the lion's share of the royalties. Um, I think, honestly, and this is really not a great answer, it's an annoying answer. I was very lucky. I had a couple of really good promotions. That's annoying because it's not easily replicable. So apologies for that. But I was looking back through my timeline so I could answer you properly. And The Night Raven came out October 2018. And then The Silver Mark, which is the follow-up, came out in May 2019. So about 6 months. But in March, I got a Kindle daily deal on The Night Raven, and that really boosted things. And then in launch week of The Silver Mark, I got a BookBub on The Night Raven. And the following month, so June 2019, I had my first solid 5-figure month. And that was with 2 books in that series, 1 standalone in fiction. So, and then I thought, I can't believe this is happening.
How did you keep the momentum going after that?
Poorly, I think. I have had on my list of things to do master advertising for quite some time. I've got Mark Dawson's course, I've done it, but I still haven't scaled up Amazon ads. I have been running them. I spend about £300 a month maybe on Amazon ads, and it's on my list of things to do is to try and up that. Facebook, again, I've dabbled, but I've maybe done 2 weeks worth of Facebook ads. I haven't spent very much at all there. Again, it's a plan to do that. What I did do is I stayed in touch with my newsletter, not a huge newsletter, but really organic, very engaged. I kept in touch with them every month. And then I got the third book out another 6 months later. So again, nowhere near rapid release of any kind, but I was staying in touch with my core readers, I guess, and letting them know the book was coming. But yeah, I don't know. Sorry.
That's all right. No, it's good that you've been able to keep it going. That's one of the challenges. It's like a book club's great, but then to continue to sell month after month is always hard.
I mean, you definitely see the drop off, don't you? The release month, and then the month after was fantastic, but then you sort of see it coming down, and I'm hoping that over time I'll get more used to that kind of. I'll get less panicky about the fact that you watch it kind of. You watch your income decline or your sales decline until you have another release. But I feel I hope that so far the base level is getting higher with each release. So I hope that continues more or less.
It definitely helps when you have more books in your backlist too. So when you do
Mm.
get more people in, hopefully they'll become fans and go read everything.
Another thing I would say that possibly helped is that it's hard to know, but I sold the audiobook rights to WFF House, and so then they're always coming out later, and I don't know whether then you've got another thing that you can promote. And I know that they did a wee bit of promotion, and I had a sort of some placement on Audible and things, and I think that I might not be releasing very fast, but I think hopefully then the other format coming out, and and I also released a box set of the first 3 in the series just last month. And again, I think it just helps those having some things coming out, even though I'm quite slow.
Right. It gives you something else to market.
Yeah.
So you've been writing urban and contemporary fantasy for a few years. What are your thoughts on the state of the genre today and how competitive it is for indie authors, or all authors, I guess?
I feel so ill-equipped to answer this question because I kind of, as I say, the solid urban fantasy has been just the last couple of years. Um, I It does seem quite competitive. I know it's obviously a competitive genre, but I can't. I don't think about marketing when I'm writing at all. So it's just what I love writing. All fiction ends up with a bit of magic or supernatural or something weird going on in it when I write it. And so I just have to accept that it's going to be maybe a wee bit tricky. I know that when I was going trad, a lot of feedback I would get was continually, it's going to be a hard sell. This is cross genre. It's going to be tough to sell. Or, would you like to write a straight crime thriller with no demons? Or, that kind of feedback. So I was kind of prepared for the fact that this is maybe tricky to sell. So from my point of view, it seems like it's great because I can't believe it's selling at all. Again, not helpful, sorry.
I think it's worth pointing out that your books are not in Kindle Unlimited,
Mm,
your indie
yeah.
books and your traditionally published books. So sometimes that really, really helps people. Having them in Kindle Unlimited helps them have, more visibility, more money. But I'm guessing that this is just showing that your stories are well written. About how long are they, each of your indie books?
My indie series are about 70,000 words each, and The Lost Girls, which is the standalone, is much longer because that was sub to trad, so it had to be 90,000, 100,000 words long. But yeah, my Crow series are reasonably short. Um, and I mean, the KU thing, oh my goodness, it was so tricky to decide what to do because listening to the podcast, I knew the advice and I went and I did my research and I looked at what was doing well in the chart for urban fantasy, and I saw the vast majority were in KU. So that would suggest launch into KU. But I didn't want to because I try to make my business decisions from the top level down, starting with my goals, my version of my definition of success, what I'm aiming for long term, because I want to do this long term. And so I knew that I didn't want to be in KU because it wasn't really aligned with that long term goal. Um, but I was really worried that I was cutting my nose off and that I was, going to fail as a result. So what I did was when I was finding my comp titles to give the cover design of the brief and so on, I didn't just look, in fact, I didn't look at the top selling KU urban fantasy books. I looked at traditional published non KU urban fantasy and used those as my comp titles for my cover. Again, I was terrified that this was a really bad idea, but urban fantasy covers have, the figure, as you all well know, have the figure, don't they? And a bit of magic. And that is time and time and time again, all the covers you'll see. And I went with, I'm holding it up for those on video, the more motif sort of cover. So I've got, stylized bird silhouettes on the front of the Night Raven, and symbols. And that was much more in keeping with my comp titles that weren't in KU. And so that was kind of what I tried to do, was place myself next to those. And I also thought that maybe that sort of cover was more common perhaps in the UK authors, whereas the figure definitely, or the US, based or urban fantasy definitely had the figure as far as I could see. And I also thought that's no bad thing if I'm warning folk that, you know, this is a British writer and the book is set in London. So I thought, but yes, I was super nervous about it.
It makes a lot of sense. I forget which show, but we discussed a while ago about how there are different cover expectations all across the board, and you know, UK versus America tend to have some pretty significant differences between book covers, even from very well-known authors. There'll be a UK and an American book release with drastically different covers. So I think it's good to sort of, again, you're setting expectations and you're sort of riding the line between on old episodes, I would use the phrase the untied shoe philosophy, which is there's a row of shoes that are tied and then one untied shoe. That's the one that catches the eye. So you have a cover that makes sense with your genre, but looks different from the other covers that also make sense for their genre because they've been targeted for different, audiences. So I think it was good thinking.
I hope so.
So those of us on the podcast have all done a fair amount of experimentation with urban fantasy. And overall, we found that there are some fairly specific expectations from the audience. What do you feel are the defining tropes and characteristics of urban fantasy?
I think I'm, again, not brilliantly placed to answer this because I read widely, but I haven't read a huge amount of sort of more modern, more recent urban fantasy. And so I'm not really that sure what's going on in the whole trope situation. But when it comes to tropes in general, what I always think about is that they are really a shorthand for the sort of reader experience, what emotional experience the reader is going to have when they read that sort of book. And for me, urban fantasy or contemporary fiction with a wee bit of fantasy in there is all about that sort of solid real world that we can recognize, but just twisted. So you can really imagine that sense of discovery that there is this whole other layer beyond the mundane that you, the chosen one, can see. And it gives you that mystery, it gives you that sense of possibility, and it gives you that feeling of being in on a amazing secret. And it also at the same time gives you that power that you're going to solve the mystery or right the wrongs or whatever. So I feel like as long as you're delivering that core experience, that core emotional experience, then the kind of story elements you can probably play with. I mean, I guess as long as you've got some fantasy.
Now, you say that you stay pretty well in contact with your audience through the newsletter. Are there any aspects that you, time and time again, people sort of let you know they really enjoyed about your writing?
Yeah, it's so incredible to me that people reply to my newsletter. And I only email probably once a month because I am an introvert and I do hate doing it, much as I'm grateful for it. But I do get lovely messages about my characters and about the world building, specifically in terms of comments I get are things like gives a realistic view of what it would be like to have magic in the world. So that I think somewhere along the line, I'm getting that experience of it is the real world, but not quite as you know it. And what would it actually be like? It's always rooted in reality.
It's interesting what you were talking about with the covers maybe appealing more in the UK. It's a shame that at this point in time anyway, we can't actually do like a different cover for the different
So
audiences.
frustrating.
Americans like don't mind the gun on the front, the real tough girl or guy covers, and I feel like that's not as big over there, and maybe not even allowed in that some of the publishers don't allow like the gun pointing towards the cover.
Yeah, and I think it's also in other genres, there's a real trend in the US there was for very photographic covers in like women's fiction. And then there was a trend in the UK for more cartoony, illustrative style. And yeah, I'm so jealous of trad publishers that they can release these different territory versions. Maybe one day.
It could be coming. You never know. I feel like with a London setting, I think Americans will read that, find it mysterious and appealing. But do you find that you sell better in the UK or in Amazon.com or the .coms?
Yeah, I think I do sell. I think I do sell better in the UK. I need to look at all my stats, don't I? But I do have lots of readers in Canada and the US and Australia, and yeah, I get lots of nice comments about people enjoying. I had a really lovely email from someone who said that they really enjoy learning new words because of my strange turns of phrase. So that was nice.
You're like, new words or new slang, maybe that we have.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, more swear words.
So as far as pricing goes, I notice you're wide, but at least right now
Mm.
you're not doing a perma-free book one, which is very popular with wide authors, of course. What have you experimented with pricing, changing the prices, or what are your thoughts on pricing?
Again, I went with with my very lack of lack of experience, I went with the kind of top-down decision making. So I decided that I wanted to try to gather readers who would pay for books, and would pay, $3.99 in the UK, $4.99 in the US, a reasonable price. So I decided that I wanted to do price promotions so that, which I do, so you get a real deal because it's not usually at that price. But that generally speaking, I wanted to train people to expect that, the books cost that amount of money. So what I did do is I did a soft launch for the Night Raven, where I did have it at a really cheap price for a couple of days to let my ARC team go and leave reviews and things, because then my concern was getting reviews and, making a success of the very first one coming out. And then I did a very tiny price drop, again, soft launch just for my newsletter people on the second book. And then I did my very first pre-order for The Fox's Curse, and that was a full price pre-order. And yeah, and then the next one again, full price pre-order. So I'm planning to carry on with the sort of price pulsing but promotions on the Night Raven. But long term, when I finish this series, I think that trying free first in series, or putting it permanently at 99 pence, something like that, is definitely going to be a strategy I'll try. I do feel like I need to work quite a bit harder to get a better foothold wide. I apply for the Kobo promotions a lot, and Kobo's doing reasonably well, but yeah, there's always so much to do, isn't there? But I feel excited that I do have all these things that I can try.
Yeah, you mentioned you've been trying the Amazon ads and Facebook ads a little bit. Are there other things? You just said the Kobo promotions. Any other advertising, or how active are you on social media and all that?
I'm useless at all of that. I do. I mean, I've done a wee bit of newsletter building, but not much. Mostly organic. What I decided to do, which is my advice for fellow introvert, feeble people like me, is to just really focus down and choose one social media platform, or two if you want to go wild. And I was already on Twitter, but I hardly ever go there. I just check my mentions and promote the podcast. That's it. Facebook, I kept on meaning, oh, I'm going to post on my page every week, and then not doing it. So last month I set it as a short-term goal, to sort of see if that makes a difference. And so, as you can tell, quite recently I've been working on that. BookBubs had a couple. That helps. Kindle deals, again, I've been lucky. I've had some Kindle deals, offers, Amazon ads, and I dipped my toe in BookBub ads and spent some money quite quickly, and I wasn't sure how. It didn't seem super successful, so I'm going to try that again when I have a price promotion on.
All right, so this is going to be a little bit of speculation on your part, I think, but so, like, well, we'll tie it to what we were talking about earlier. Your cover decision was in a way based upon, you know, what trad authors were doing, and the fact that you're wide also makes your book look more like a trad author. So do you feel like different advertising tactics work better for things like you're even setting your price in a way that's similar to trad authors? Do you think that different types of advertising help when you're sort of mimicking trad versus when you're doing a lot of the standard indie stuff like free series starter?
Oh, that's a really good question. And like you said, I think it is speculation. But you're absolutely right. I think what I've done so far has been the things that I kind of have brought over from my trad side, partly because I wanted everything to look indistinguishable, and partly, as I say, because of the sort of long-term goals, and realizing that I didn't fit into the what a lot of successful indies are doing, which is to release more frequently. And I know how slow I am, so I figured it would make sense. I don't know about in terms of advertising. I think maybe focusing on content marketing is probably a good idea, more than it being a difference with advertising. I would say focusing on branding, overall author branding and content marketing is important, because you don't have that. If you don't have a free series starter, you have got a barrier to entry. So I think that makes it more important for your marketing, whether it's your content marketing or I guess your paid marketing, to be really giving a flavor and to be drawing people in and to be playing that slightly longer game. You know, to accept the fact that you're not going to get a direct rate of return on every single piece of content or ad that you put out in the world. It's about raising that awareness and drawing people in so that eventually they will be happy to part with cash. And hopefully at that point they already know that they like you, because you've been authentic and you've used your real voice in typing, obviously, not like this. So they already know they like your writing voice, so that you've already kind of stacked the deck in your favor, that they're then going to enjoy your book, which leads to them joining your mailing list, telling their friends. And it's that frustrating, slow approach.
So do you think, does your publisher run any promotions or any advertisements for you?
Yeah, I mean, Lake Union, actually, and Karina, to be fair, I've been very lucky. They, sometimes I'll be applying for a BookBub and it'll knock me back to say, oh no, do you know you can't apply for one because we don't like to have the same author, and you've got a BookBub booked for one of your trad books. And that's the first I've heard of it. I'm sort of, oh, darn it. But obviously that's fantastic that they're still promoting. Lake Union are very good on promotion, it must be said. They know how to shift books. So yes, that's been great. I also got to experience the excitement of having a publicist with Lake Union for, a short time. And that was thrilling and exciting. But it also really hit home to me how you only, understandably, it's for such a short time. And these things don't, again, as I was just saying, things like an interview in a magazine, they don't move the needle. You don't see it. And so it feels pretty pointless. But it's that slow drip. You don't know. I've had a podcast listener say, oh, I heard about you in this magazine interview that I thought made no difference whatsoever. Then they've become a podcast listener. They haven't bought a book, but then a year later, after listening to the podcast, they've then decided to try my books or tell a friend, and it's that intangible nature of it, which, it can be really hard to deal with, but.
Yeah, so I think I'm gonna bet that you've got a solid readership. They're following you from your traditional published books, your indie books. They're already used to a slower pace, which the readers who like fast pace are going to go to the authors who have a fast pace, so, but there are readers who prefer that slower pace, and if they are already preferring that, they're going to stick around. And especially with like the book covers, like you said earlier, that match what they're expecting, prices, promotions. I mean, this is all part of a solid business plan. You decide at the outset what your goals are, and then you make sure you always stay within that goal, and then not to jump around. Because one of the things I've done is I don't generally release quickly. I release three books a year, sometimes 4 books a year, but occasionally I try to release faster than that. And my readers, I get complaints, and so I'm like, my problem has been consistency. And if you're not being consistent, then it's too hard for readers to figure out, it's too hard for readers to find you if you're not consistent to their styles.
I think that's so true.
Okay, so we, as I mentioned earlier, you have a book in this year's Nano Story bundle. It's called Stop Worrying and Start Writing: How to Overcome Fear, Self-Doubt, and Procrastination. So what led you to write that? You can just delve right into that book and explain it. And then you've also got another one that's Stop Worrying and Start Selling. So you can go ahead and just explain why you wrote those books.
So Stop Worrying, Start Writing, I wrote because I was utterly riddled with self-doubt, and it took me a very long time to really try writing fiction properly. I always put it off. I wrote lots of angsty journal entries about how I wanted to be a writer, but that I couldn't do it. I wasn't clever enough. I didn't have enough ideas. What if I did it and I couldn't? And then the dream would be taken away, and all of that. And then, as I say, when I finally got over those hurdles, I just found that the more external validation, the things that I thought would fix me, did not fix me. And I also then learned through doing the podcast that I wasn't alone. All the things that I thought about being, very, very, very anxious person and quite a worrier, and being filled with self-doubt, those things didn't mean that I couldn't be a writer. I found that was actually quite normal. And it was such a weight lifted off me that I wanted to provide that for other terrified writers. And also, with the podcast, I was helping folk who emailed me, and I did a wee bit of one-to-one mentoring and things, which I enjoyed. But it's not a super efficient way of helping people. So I kind of thought, if I put it all in a book, then I've got somewhere to direct people, And then the same thing with the with Stop Worrying, Start Selling. I kind of figure out what I think about things by writing. So I knew that I needed to get better at selling and marketing. I knew that I had massive mindset issues around it that was stopping me from doing it, stopping me from really trying. And I am ambitious. I do want to do well in this job. So I really worked on those issues. And a lot of that, as I say, is through writing. I journal about things. I write them down. I learn about them and then I write about what I'm learning. And so I thought, after a wee while, actually, I think I've got another book here. And also, if I'm not the only introvert writer who's struggling, and again on podcasts or with my friends, the same things will come up over and over and over again. I just want to write. I don't want to do the marketing. And it hit me that I didn't want to spend the rest of what I dearly hope is a long career being negative about that side of it, because we don't live in a magical unicorn land where books are magically discovered. We just don't. It would be great if we did, but we don't. And I thought, I don't want to be, I'm sick of myself whinging about this. Like, I need to change my attitude. And that has really, really helped. And so again, I wrote the book so that I could point people to it and say, that's everything that I've learned so far.
It's funny how often the best way to learn something is to try to teach it, which is possibly one of the reasons that I'm on a podcast like this, is to desperately absorb new information in the process of distributing it. But it seems like you're fairly on board with the idea that writing seems to attract people who have self-doubt and self-deprecation issues. What do you think the source is for that? What do you think its link is to just writers of fiction?
I think that it's because writing is genuinely terrifying. Honestly, I think if you're writing something and then anybody else is going to read it, let alone the general public, you are opening up your heart, your soul, your brain, the stories, the fantasies you have, and then you're putting them on the page or the Kindle, and you're saying, please judge me, see inside the dark corners of me, and then leave a review. It's horrifying. The whole thing is horrifying. That is why we're so scared, because we're sensible. We've got good reason to be. And also, I think it's an evolutionary thing. You know, we're programmed to really fear embarrassment and shame. And that's because it makes sense to stay in the tribe. You know, from an evolutionary point of view, it's safe in the tribe by the nice warm fire. So you don't want to be embarrassed, you don't want to be an outcast. And so those kind of feelings of embarrassment, or the fear of embarrassment, they really hit us. They hit us on a fundamental level. And I think that if you can accept that what you're doing is really, really blooming tough, then that goes some way to helping you to kind of do it anyway, rather than just feeling as if it's something that you should be fine with. And I also think another reason I think that writers are particularly filled with self-doubt and criticism is that most writers are readers first, or lovers of story in whatever form. So we've spent years using our critical brain to tell us what we enjoy, what we don't enjoy, whether we like the ending of that particular series, whether that character should have been killed off, whether that worked for us, all of that. And that's fantastic for telling us what we want to read next. Useless for judging our own work, because we basically turn that critical brain and we judge our own first draft words against the published novel we just read and enjoyed. And I think that's a huge part of it. And my final reason why I think we are so terrified is to do with our own voice. So our own voices, by their very nature, are really dull to us because we live with them. So when you're writing and you're actually in your own voice, when you're really on it, writing really, really well, probably to the best of your ability, you are very in your voice. So then when you read it over, it seems dull. It seems dull, it seems embarrassing, it seems predictable, because it's the voice you know. So I think that's another reason.
That's a fantastic answer across the board. I had not thought about half of that stuff, and it's very much makes tremendous sense. So you mentioned, like, if you're a writer, you're inviting your stuff to be criticized and judged. Critiques and other forms of criticism are also completely indispensable to improving your crafts, and especially if you're an introvert, even getting critiques is hard, and then taking them, if they're not, rosy, is even harder. So, like, how do you seek and receive critiques without crumbling?
Oh, so difficult. Yes, anybody listening who is still trying to get up the nerve to show their work to somebody else for the first time, or to get a critique, please know that I was an absolute wreck for years with this, and I still am. You're definitely not alone, and it's completely normal to feel that, to feel that way. Having said that, it does get easier with practice. The first time I talked about my book with somebody else, or had them read some of my creative writing, I thought I was going to die. And it does get easier. The more you do it, the more you realize the sky doesn't fall in, you survive. However, you should also, I think, be super careful about who you approach for a critique. It's my opinion that you want folk, if you're earlier on and you're still we're always learning, of course, but if you're really early on, then what you want, in my opinion, is a developmental editor, or somebody who is ahead of you somewhere in some way. Somebody who writes your genre would be even better, someone or knows about your genre, even better. You don't want too many opinions, because you don't want to try and write by committee. And I think also, actually, swapping critiques can be really good, because the act of criticizing somebody else's work is almost I would say maybe even more valuable. And I think, Lindsay, I think you might have said this on the podcast, that when you were in a group that you found critiquing other people's stories really valuable. Another thing I would say is that you do develop your own kind of sense, your own writerly sense about whether some feedback is helpful or applies to your story. And again, unhelpful answer is it takes time. It takes a lot of writing. It takes working on your own stuff to get that. And also always remember that it's just taste. There is no universally agreed upon gold standard of literary work. And so if someone is reading your work, if a beta reader, you want to make sure that they like the sort of book you're writing, that kind of thing. You want to really make sure, curate where you're getting your opinions.
Yeah, I like your advice to not have that many beta readers. I always have readers volunteering, and I'm like, no, I've got like 3 people. That's good, because you get conflicting voices, and sometimes it just takes too long to go through everybody's stuff too. But there's a lot of, I don't know, it's like you can make more self-doubt if there's some people say this, some people hated this character, some people love them. And it does take a while as a writer to develop the confidence in your voice and your skill to like sort of, if know whether what they say applies or whether you're like, no, that's just not right. But in the beginning, we have no confidence, as you said.
Absolutely. And I think the kind of feedback which is just, early on, especially, read this as a reader and tell me what you thought it was or what tripped you up. And it's not so much tell me what was wrong with it, it's tell me how you felt about it when you were reading it, or if you didn't understand a bit. And then you as the writer go and look at why that might be. And then, as you say, later on, when you're getting beta reads, when you're a wee bit more experienced, it's a case of not too many. And the deciding vote always goes to the author, always. So if your gut's telling you, it's your book. It is your book. You get to choose. Or if one person says one thing and the other person says the other, deciding vote, author, every time. It's your book.
That's the nice thing about self-publishing is you can decide in the end. There's not as much pressure from someone else.
Oh, it's amazing. I love it.
All right, so I have to ask, the blurb for your Stop Worrying, Start Writing book says how you can smash writing blocks to finish stories faster and trick yourself into being more productive. So do you have any tips that you can share for our listeners?
Absolutely. I have a huge amount of experience, sadly, in battling writing blocks and all of that. So my first tip, absolute top tip, is lie to yourself. Now, I am extremely adept at this. I have honed this over the years. So I will lie to myself when I'm writing. So I will say, nobody will ever read this. It's another reason why marketing has to stay right out of my writing office. All business does, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to lie to myself with such success. So nobody will ever read this. I've even gone as far as to put a different pen name, a pen name that doesn't exist, on the title page, on a blank page, such and such by made up name, because it's that this is not me and nobody will see it. This is not a Sarah Painter novel, or, so there's that. There's also lying to myself through the process in terms of not looking at the whole thing. So rather than thinking, I'm going to write this scene today, it is, I will lie to myself and I'm going to write a sentence today, or I'm going to open the document today. I will keep on bringing down that, I will break down the task until it is so small that even I can do it in my feeble state. And I do that with everything, honestly, absolutely everything. I break it down. Another thing I do is to focus on process, not the product. So I think about practicing writing, and I talk about practicing or playing, or rather than as if I was learning an instrument. So, you talk about practicing the piano or practicing scales or something. So I try to catch myself and to rewire the way I talk about it and think about it. So it's all about, if I show up and practice writing today, I get my cookie. Like, I have got the gold star. I also have rewards. But I genuinely celebrate. I am working on a process. Being a writer means I spend this amount of time practicing writing, regardless of the word count or the quality. I don't even think about where it's going. And I will spend time reading or watching Netflix, and I will spend time having a walk and maybe having a wee think, because that's what being a writer is. And if I've done those things through the day, that's what gets the gold star. And over time, that will help.
I know that, especially when we talk about breaking down into smaller pieces, I know a lot of people who've sent me emails like, I don't even know how to get started. How do I get started? A book is a big, huge thing, and I got a blank page in front of me. I'm like, well, if you write something on the blank page, it's not blank anymore. Like, you'd be amazed at how often just writing the first sentence makes the second sentence easier. So, yeah, I absolutely understand like the idea of not overwhelming yourself with what will eventually be a titanic number of tasks, because each one is just one.
Tiny.
All right, so a lot of novice authors know all that they know about book marketing is what they've seen traditional book marketing do, and that's book tours and interviews. And these are obviously pretty seldom, if ever, a part of indie marketing. So already indie marketing is frequently more suited to introverts. What would you say is the most extroverted thing that an indie author is likely to do, and what do you think introverts have in favor of them in indie marketing?
I mean, I'm so glad that you asked this question, because it's so true. It's another opportunity for me to be ridiculously positive about this amazing job that we get to do, which is that it's perfectly suited for introverts. And yeah, there are lots of things, and I've spoken to trad authors about this. Nobody can make you do, unless it's written into your contract, which you then signed, so you still chose it. Nobody can make you speak to a room full of people, or do a Facebook Live, or anything that is frightening to you in any way. You don't have to do any of those things. But as you say, with indie, even if you're trad, you don't have to do those things. Like, a publisher might ask you to, you might feel a pressure to do it, but you still don't have to do it. So I always think that's important to remember, especially when you're in an industry that you might feel very out of control in. But yes, in indie, I think some of the things with introverts that are particularly well suited are, again, in doing things in writing. I mean, works out pretty well. Trying to avoid overwhelm, so focusing down, choosing, one social media platform, or deciding you're not doing it at all, choosing instead to focus on your newsletter. I think, again, you guys will probably agree with this. You should have a newsletter, but you can decide how often you're going to engage with that newsletter. And I do have, again, I would break down doing your newsletter. So I will write my email draft on one day. That's all the task for that day. And then I don't think about sending it until a few days later, things like that. So it's sort of, rather than making it all big one scary performance, I remind myself that it's not. It is something that I'm in control of, that I can then rewrite, that I can, practice before anybody has to see it. And I think that's another thing that is really good to remember as an introvert, is that we don't have to get up on stage, but we do have an external author persona, or we should do. Because again, when I started, when I was first published, I just felt so overwhelmed and so frightened of being out there, even in that tiny, tiny way. So what I did was, I really thought about putting on an author hat, if you like, a bit like my business hat. And it's kind of like, it's like going on stage. I'm still me. Author Sarah is still authentically Sarah, but it's a facet of me. It's a facet of my personality. It's the work Sarah, and having that separation really, really helps. To then post on Facebook or write a newsletter, because it's author Sarah doing it, not private Sarah. I don't think I answered your question. I went off on one there.
It was still good info.
That's awesome. I just have a couple questions left for you, if that's okay.
Of
They're not
course.
on the list, but just listening to you made me want to ask them. You mentioned rewards. What sorts of rewards do you use when you meet your goals?
Oh, so much stationery. Oh,
Stationery.
Andrea. Oh,
I love it.
I love stationery so much. So yes, I am, an 8-year-old apparently, because stickers, colored pens, washi tape, so many planners, so many notebooks. It's a problem. I do have a problem. And I also tea, um, tea and cake sometimes, wine sometimes, but no, stationery is my big one. And I do also save up books that I really want to read. I read all the time, but there's a book you're really looking forward to. I think, okay, when I've finished the draft or these edits, then I get that book.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I love paper, like paper, any kind of paper, notepads and pretty paper and just plain paper and pens.
Colored Post-it notes.
Pens.
Oh, my
Yes.
goodness.
Oh my gosh. Yes. My husband's been stealing mine.
So many.
I have like this drawer of them, and like every now and then I'm like, where's my pink one? Okay. So, for the moms and people in the audience who have full-time jobs, how do you wrangle being a mom and running a business and writing?
Well, I have to say it's a lot easier now because my kids are much, much older. So my baby is 17 now, and my older girl is 20 and has left home, gone to university. So I have more time now than I have ever had, which is amazing. But I started all of this back when I had a toddler and a baby. And so all I can remember really is the magic of how much you can get done in a very short, focused space of time. And also working in cycles. And I still do this now, because the more time you have, the more likely, or the more time I have, the more likely I am to procrastinate and get filled with self-doubt. So I still use this strategy, and it's to divide, to work project-based. I divide the year up. I like quarterly. So I will have a couple of goals for a quarter. I'll have my reasons for those goals, so I'm really behind them. And then I do the breaking down into the small tasks. And I have kind of light brain tasks. So, a day when you haven't had enough sleep. Those. Yeah, sorry. Of course, those days. You're living those days.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So then it's for me to keep my mood, to feel like I'm still making progress. I can then take that light brain task that's going to take 8 minutes, and I can at some point during the day hopefully do that one task, and then I get my gold star and I move forward, and the day is a win. I think the challenge is really believing that the day is a win, because comparisonitis means that we're continually thinking, I should be doing X, Y, and Z, or I should be moving forward faster. But yes, I think focusing down, being really project-based, cutting out, saying no more than you say yes, and then just occasionally, on days when you can't write, or you can't even do that one wee task, cutting yourself a break. Really bring down that that level that you're trying to hit. If you got out of bed and the kids are all still breathing, gold star.
I'm sitting here laughing so hard because like you're just describing, Mike, I bring down my bar, like my little bar goes down like every week it's gone lower. I'm like, okay, I like got out of bed this week. Okay, I got out of bed after the kids fed themselves breakfast. I'm getting worse. Our toddler, like he's just, man, this kid, like he's seriously hurt himself 4 times in the last 3 months, where he's a thumb sucker and it's in his mouth. He's like gotten huge, horrible sores, cuts, needs stitches. And I'm like, it's been 4 times in the last 3 months. And thumb sucker, he's up all night, every night for the light. It's just been, I'm like, you're like 19 months. You're supposed to be our sleeper now, not waking up all night.
But it's always timing as well, isn't it? it's either like things after one after the other, or they'll just be poorly when you think you've got everything sorted, and then there'll be a doctor's visit or a sleepless night or 12, and
Yes.
yeah, it derails things.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been great having you here. Kate, I know people have heard me say this, so for those who have not heard it, where can people find your book in the story bundle?
Oh my goodness. So it's storybundle.com
Yeah, /nano.
/nano. That's right. So yes, it's the NaNoWriMo bundle. Yes.
And then your other one, is it just
Oh yes. The other one, Stop Worrying, Start Selling, it's available wide. So wherever you like to buy your books.
I like to buy my books on my phone.
Oh, okay. And I am recording the audiobook of it this month, so there will be an audio version. It's just a wee bit later than I had planned originally. 2020, what can I say?
Awesome. And your fiction, your website, what is your website? So people can look up, is your nonfiction and your fiction both on your website?
It is. There's also the podcast website is worriedwriter.com, or for my fiction, my main site is sarah-painter.com. But if you Google Sarah Painter Books, you should find me.
Yeah, that was going to be my last question, the podcast. So Worried Writer podcast, you've been doing that for like 5 years, you said?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, awesome. I am on a wee hiatus. I did it for 5 years with no breaks. And then again, 2020, I'm just gonna keep blaming this year, but I thought, oh, I'm just gonna take a wee break, because again, final bit of advice, I guess, is it's so overwhelming with all the things that we can do, and we don't have to do them all the time forever and ever. So it's okay to have seasons. Like Andrew, you're maybe in a season in your personal life
of constant panic.
But you won't be forever. You won't be forever. And I just thought, actually, I need a few months. The most important thing for my business is to get the next fiction book out. So I need to just take a wee break on that. But I do miss it. So I'll probably be back in 2021.
Nice. Awesome. Thank you again so much for joining us. And
thank you.
Thank you everyone for listening. Thank you to Joshua Pearson for producing the show. You can find the show notes. I think I do that every time. Or leave a comment or question at sixfigureauthors.com with the number 6, and come join the Facebook group as well. The answer is not Lindsay or Andrea about the beard, though if you do answer Lindsay or Andrea, we probably will let you in. Okay. Thank you everyone. We'll talk to you all later. Bye.
Bye-bye.
So long, everybody.